The sky tore open like a wound, splitting the calm blue with streaks of silver and steel. Across continents, people paused, eyes drawn upward, mouths slightly open in awe and terror. From that rift, immense ships descended. They were not like anything humankind had ever seen. Sleek and metallic, each surface gleaming as if liquid mercury had been frozen mid-motion. Their engines thrummed with a resonance that seemed almost alive, vibrating through the air, shaking the very ground beneath cities, forests, and plains. The hum was subtle yet impossible to ignore, a deep note that felt like it was pulling at something primal inside every human being. The largest of these ships hovered over the Atlantic, casting a shadow that blotted out the sun. From it, a figure emerged, stepping onto the hull with an elegance and authority that made him look like the embodiment of conquest itself. His skin was pale gray, almost metallic, eyes molten silver with flecks of light that seemed to pierce through both air and soul. His name was Kael'thar, commander of the Zoran fleet, conqueror of worlds and hunter of civilizations. He surveyed Earth with calculated disdain. Primitive, weak, yet ripe for conquest, Kael'thar said, his voice smooth, deliberate, carrying a confidence that brooked no contradiction. His words were translated by their advanced communication devices, broadcast in a voice that reached millions simultaneously. Fear rippled through the world. Governments scrambled. Military bases activated emergency protocols. People panicked. Cities became chaotic with sirens and shouted commands. And yet, amid the tremor of dread, there was another current, something Kael'thar had not predicted, something that made the silver of his eyes pause just for a moment. It was defiance, pure, unpolished, and raw. On the outskirts of a ruined village, Liora, a young woman with dark hair streaked with dust and eyes like molten amber, crouched behind the shell of a burnt-out car. Around her, families huddled in fear, whispering prayers and hoping that the invasion was just a nightmare. Liora's voice, however, broke through their fear with a fire they had almost forgotten. They may have machines, but we have each other. We fight or we die knowing we tried, she whispered fiercely. Her words were not meant for the conquerors above. They were meant for the trembling hearts of her own people. And yet it was as if the earth itself absorbed her resolve, amplifying it, weaving it into the very air. Humans had faced catastrophe before, storms, plagues, wars. But the threat of total annihilation was something new. Even so, fear was tempered by courage. Across forests, mountains, and rivers, ordinary people, farmers, teachers, children, engineers, began scavenging whatever weapons they could find. Old rifles, hunting knives, hammers, and even rocks became tools of defiance. Cities might fall, but their spirit, unbroken, would resist. Kael'thar moved across the observation deck of his ship, his hand trailing over consoles that displayed the entirety of Earth. For a moment, he allowed himself a rare flicker of curiosity. He had conquered dozens of planets. Species fell like sand in his grasp. But Earth was different. The humans stared back at his fleet, some trembling, yes, but most refusing to look away. There was an electricity to them, an unpredictable spark that even the most sophisticated Zoran algorithms could not calculate. The first humans, Kael'thar observed, were a group of fighters rallying in what remained of a city square. Their arms were rudimentary, yet the determination in their posture was undeniable. Every glance, every small gesture whispered a warning. We are not yours to command. We are not yours to break. And in that instant, Kael'thar understood something he had never considered. Conquest was not merely about firepower or superior technology. Conquest was about domination of spirit. And here, on this blue planet, the human spirit roared back at him. The skies over Earth grew darker as the ship settled into orbit. Lightning flashed in distant storms, reflecting off the hulls of the Zoran vessels like silver veins. Humanity, fragile and unprepared, was already beginning to fight, not yet with swords or guns, but with something older, something raw, courage. Liora climbed to the rooftop of a crumbling building, scanning the horizon with a fierce determination. If they want to conquer us, she said aloud, voice firm against the wind and distant thunder, they will learn that humanity is not so easily broken. And for the first time since he set foot on Earth, Kael'thar felt a ripple of unease. The humans were not what they appeared to be. They were fragile, yes, but within that fragility burned a fire he could neither measure nor predict. The invasion had begun. The humans had no idea what lay ahead, but the first spark of resistance had already been lit. And sparks, when nurtured, could ignite into a blaze that no force, no matter how mighty, could extinguish. The first footsteps of the Jorin on Earth struck like hammers against the bones of the planet. Kael'thar's soldiers, tall and lithe with skin that glinted like silver, moved with precision, scanning every street, every ruin, every hiding place. They expected terror, collapse, submission. They expected humans to scatter like frightened prey. They were wrong. In the abandoned city of Verdun, streets lined with toppled buildings and shattered glass became the stage for something Kael'thar could not anticipate: resistance. Humans, though unarmed in the traditional sense, had armed themselves with creativity and determination. Farmers wielded pitchforks, blacksmiths forged crude blades, and scavengers had rigged traps that could trip a tank-sized machine. It was chaotic, unpolished, and utterly terrifying to the Jorin. A man with broad shoulders and hands hardened by decades of tilling soil crouched behind a collapsed wall with a rifle that had long outlived its warranty. His eyes burned with a calm fury as he watched a hovering drone glide through the smoky ruins. He gritted his teeth, not for fear, but for the moment of truth. The moment he could remind the invaders that humans were neither weak nor predictable. When the drone passed above, Jorin hurled a Molotov cocktail, its flame trailing like a comet. The glass shattered against the drone's metal shell and fire erupted, licking across its surface. Sparks rained down. The machine wavered, its systems briefly overloaded. Nearby humans cheered, but Jorin's eyes were fixed, unrelenting. The drone recalibrated, spinning in the air like a wounded predator. But something in the human defiance had unbalanced the Jorin's calculations. From a nearby rooftop, Liora observed the scene. Her amber eyes caught the glint of Kael'thar's command ship in the distance. She whispered to a small group of fighters, "Do not let them see fear. Do not let them see doubt. Let them see only what we will do to survive." Her voice carried over the wind, small yet commanding, weaving courage into every soul around her. Meanwhile, Kael'thar studied the humans below, a subtle frown forming on his pale features. He had faced countless species, all of whom crumbled when confronted with the inevitability of his force. But these humans, they were unpredictable. They were alive in a way no algorithm could measure, moving not with strategy alone but with passion, courage, and, most importantly, refusal. Kael'thar sent a scout to capture a human for study. A healer, a mother, anyone who could provide insight into their resilience. The soldier returned, dragging Mara, a woman in her 30s with hands calloused from tending the sick and wounded. Kael'thar expected tears, pleas, a visible collapse of spirit. Instead, Mara's eyes met his without flinching. "You will not break us," she said quietly, her voice steady, carrying both defiance and sorrow. "We do not require your mercy to live. We do not require your approval to fight. You will leave one day and we will remain." Kael'thar froze. He had never encountered a species whose courage was inseparable from their vulnerability. Humans bled, they screamed, they cried, but they endured. Their resilience was not the cold, mechanical endurance of an automaton. It was messy, emotional, raw, and infinitely more dangerous. The skirmish continued. Fires burned in streets and alleys. Cries of alarm and defiance intertwined into a symphony of chaos. Every trap laid by humans slowed the Jorin advance. Every defiant stand challenged the belief that victory was inevitable. Even Kael'thar's lieutenants whispered among themselves, uneasy for the first time since the campaign began. "Why fight such creatures who seem more savage than we imagined?" one lieutenant asked. Kael'thar did not answer immediately. Instead, he watched a child climb atop a ruined wall, waving a makeshift flag fashioned from torn cloth. The child's courage was reckless, foolish, and yet profoundly human. He felt something stir in his chest, a flicker of doubt, of admiration, and of unease he could not name. Across the globe, resistance was blooming. In forests, villages, mountains, and deserts, humans refused to hide or surrender. Ordinary citizens became soldiers. Healers became leaders, and fear transformed into determination. Each act of defiance, no matter how small, became a testament to the unbroken nature of humanity. Kael'thar realized, slowly and reluctantly, that the invasion of Earth was unlike any conquest he had ever known. These humans were fragile, yes, and unpredictable. They could be wounded, they could be killed, and yet their spirit did not fracture. It bent, but did not break. And for the first time, Kael'thar considered the possibility that the humans' greatest weapon was not technology, not strategy, not strength, but their heart. As night fell over the city of Verdun, fires from human resistance glowed like distant stars. Kael'thar stared down at the glowing defiance below, a thought taking root in his mind. Perhaps the humans were not meant to be conquered. Perhaps they were something far more dangerous, the unbroken, unyielding spirit of life itself. The first contact had ended, but the war for Earth's soul was only beginning. And already the humans were proving one undeniable truth. They would fight, not because they could win, but because they refused to surrender. The Jorin had expected to find broken spirits, trembling faces, and desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, they found humanity in its rawest, most unyielding form. Kael'thar, commander of the Jorin fleet, had grown accustomed to victory. He had conquered dozens of worlds, crushed civilizations that had dreamed themselves invincible, and watched species vanish like dust in the void. But Earth was different. Humans bled, yes, they screamed and cried, but their spirit refused to fracture. They were fragile, yes, yet they burned brighter than any world he had conquered. The captured healer, Mara, became the focus of Kael'thar's study. She was taken aboard his command ship, her hands bound and her clothes torn from the chaos of capture. He expected resistance, defiance, perhaps even tears. What he did not expect was the serenity in her eyes, the calm confidence that radiated like a quiet flame. "You will not break us," she said softly, her voice carrying a weight that neither chains nor threats could suppress. "Even if we fall, even if we bleed, we endure, and we will rise again. That is our nature." Kael'thar studied her, fascinated and disturbed. In all his campaigns, no species had possessed such a combination of vulnerability and indomitable courage. The humans were fragile yet fierce, weak yet unyielding. Every cry of pain was matched by a declaration of survival. Every loss birthed a renewed determination. He asked her, "Why do you resist? Why fight when defeat is certain?" Mara's gaze met his, steady and unwavering. "Because we have no choice but to fight. Because to surrender is to erase who we are. You cannot conquer what is eternal within us. You can kill our bodies, but never our spirit." The words echoed in Kael'thar's mind long after the chains were removed. They haunted him in ways his calculations could not explain. Humans were not merely creatures of flesh, they were creatures of fire, of hope, of defiance. They were unpredictable, chaotic, and breathtakingly alive. On Earth, Liora moved silently through ruined streets, gathering survivors and organizing resistance. Children clung to her skirts, frightened and hungry, yet inspired by the unwavering strength she carried. She knew every corner, every alley, every shadow that could be turned into a sanctuary or a trap. With her, fear became strategy, terror became courage, and despair became fuel for survival. Jorin, the farmer-turned-fighter, led a band of villagers into the forests surrounding Verdun. There they fashioned traps, laid ambushes, and trained themselves in guerrilla tactics. They were ordinary people, unprepared for war, yet their hearts were unbreakable. Every night by firelight they told stories of home, of lost loved ones, and of dreams that could not die. These stories became shields as strong as any weapon. Kael'thar observed these actions through his advanced sensors, each report a puzzle he could not solve. The humans' cohesion was not born from command or strategy. It was born from love, loyalty, and the shared understanding of what it meant to endure. They were savage, yes, but not with cruelty. Their savagery was rooted in life itself, in the raw insistence to survive against impossible odds. One night, Mara was allowed to walk the observation deck under guard. She looked at the stars and whispered almost to herself, "We are small, but we are fire. We may stumble, we may fall, but we will rise again. That is the truth of us. That is the heart of humanity. Kelthar stood silently nearby, uncharacteristically silent, watching the humans' quiet defiance against the vast darkness of space. He realized that the humans' power was not in machines or weapons, but in their capacity to feel, to hope, to fight even when the odds were stacked impossibly against them. Every act of courage, every small triumph, every refusal to bow was a testament to a truth that no calculation could measure. Humans were unbroken. The Jorin began to question themselves. Kelthar's lieutenants whispered doubts for the first time since the invasion began. Are we truly prepared to face such creatures? One asked. Kelthar did not answer immediately. He knew that victory was no longer a certainty. It had become a possibility fraught with danger. Back on Earth, Liora led a group of survivors to a ruined school, turning classrooms into command posts and dormitories into shelters. Mara treated the wounded, singing softly to children too young to understand the war around them. Jorin trained fighters, instilling in them a discipline forged not from orders, but from belief, from hope, from the unshakable conviction that their lives, their people, and their freedom were worth every risk. Kelthar returned to his command bridge, watching the humans in awe and unease. They were fragile, yes. They bled, they cried, and they died. But in every loss and every struggle, they discovered strength. The human heart was not a simple engine of survival. It was a storm, unbound, unpredictable, and impossible to destroy. And for the first time, Kelthar realized a terrifying truth. Conquering humans was not just a battle of weapons. It was a battle against something far greater, far more dangerous and far more eternal, the human spirit itself. The Jorin unleashed their full might. Earth's nights became alive with fire and shadow, as massive weapons tore through cities and forests. Entire districts vanished in brilliant, blinding flashes. The sky was lit with a cruel, unnatural light, as if the stars themselves had fled in fear. Yet amid the destruction, humans did not cower. They did not scatter. They adapted. Liora guided a group of children, elders, and survivors through tunnels beneath the ruins of a city that had once thrived. Every corner, every doorway, every shadow was a potential trap or sanctuary. Her voice, calm yet commanding, carried through the tunnels like a beacon. Stay close. Breathe slow. Move with me. They may crush our homes, but they will never crush us if we move together. Outside, Jorin led fighters through the forested hills surrounding the city. He had transformed the landscape into a labyrinth of ambush points, pit traps, and hidden snares. Branches hung like snares, rocks balanced precariously above pathways, and every trail became a challenge for the Jorin's mechanical precision. Ordinary farmers, mechanics, and hunters became guerrilla warriors, guided by ingenuity, instinct, and a desperate determination to survive. Meanwhile, Mara moved between shelters, treating wounds with whatever supplies she could scavenge. Her hands were steady, but her heart was heavy. She whispered to the injured, to the frightened, to the children who clung to her skirts. Pain is temporary. You are stronger than you know. Hold fast and we will rise again. Her words became more than comfort, they became a weapon. Hope, she knew, could sustain the spirit even when flesh and blood faltered. The Jorin, accustomed to surrender, were shocked. Every city they thought conquered fought back from shadows. Every district they obliterated became a crucible for resistance. Their drones fell into hidden traps. Their soldiers were ambushed in narrow alleys. Every advance met a counterstrike born not of formal strategy but of desperate, brilliant improvisation. Kelthar watched the chaos unfold from his command ship, his molten eyes flicking over data screens that displayed losses he had never anticipated. This was not just resistance. It was organized savagery, the kind that grew from fear, courage, and raw survival instinct. He realized reluctantly that humanity's true strength was not in technology or numbers, but in creativity, unpredictability, and the refusal to surrender. At the edge of the city, a small group of fighters led by Jorin prepared an ambush. Using homemade explosives, they disabled a Jorin transport vehicle, sending it crashing into the ruins of a collapsed building. The metallic screams of the Jorin soldiers echoed through the streets, followed by the triumphant cheers of humans. It was a victory small in scale but immense in significance. Each successful strike, each display of defiance emboldened others. Liora's group emerged from tunnels to reclaim part of the city square. Children, terrified yet resilient, helped carry supplies. Elders guided the group through safe paths. Even the wounded struggled to rise. Humans, Kelthar realized, fought not just for survival. They fought for each other, for a home, for a future that could not be destroyed by metal and fire alone. The night grew darker, the fires brighter. Mara tended to the wounded under the glow of burning buildings, her voice carrying a song of endurance to calm terrified children. She did not hide from the destruction. She walked through it, touching shoulders, bandaging wounds, and reminding everyone that humanity's true power lay not in strength alone, but in compassion and unity. Kelthar's frustration grew. He had calculated outcomes for years, predicted patterns of resistance, anticipated fear responses. Yet the humans defied every expectation. They adapted to every strategy he deployed. Their courage was irrational, unpredictable, and profoundly dangerous. Every attempt to crush them resulted in new forms of resistance, creative countermeasures, and acts of pure defiance. By dawn, the city was a patchwork of ruin and rebellion. Smoke rose in spirals above broken buildings. Firelight flickered across alleyways, and humans moved with an energy that no calculation could predict. Kelthar realized something that shook him to his core. The humans' resilience was not merely tactical. It was something deeper, something elemental. They fought not only to survive, but because survival was meaningless without defiance. For the first time in his career, Kelthar considered that Earth might not be a conquest at all. That perhaps in the fires, in the shadows, in the relentless defiance of humans, he was witnessing something that could not be conquered. A spirit unbroken by fear, unbent by fire, unbowed by war. And in the midst of chaos, Liora, Mara, and Jorin stood together on a ruined rooftop. Looking over the city they were barely defending, hearts pounding, eyes blazing with unshakable resolve. Humanity had survived another night. The Siege of Shadows was not a time for despair, it was a time to rise. And rise they did. The war had dragged on for weeks, and the Zoran forces, though technologically superior, were beginning to feel the weight of an enemy that refused to bow. They had expected Earth to crumble within days, cities to fall in orderly submission, and humanity to accept the inevitability of defeat. Instead, they found a species unbroken, a species whose will was forged in the fire of adversity, and whose courage defied the cold logic of conquest. Kelthar observed the humans from orbit, scanning their movements, their resistance, their every attempt to fight back. His calculations, honed through centuries of war, began to fail him. The human strength was impossible to quantify. It was not in numbers, nor in weapons, nor in formal strategy. It was something far more dangerous, their relentless resolve. On the ground, Liora moved through the remnants of her city, organizing supply lines and safe zones. Children and elders followed her, carrying water, food, and supplies. She spoke quietly but with authority, her voice cutting through the chaos. Every step we take is a statement. Every breath we survive is a victory. Do not forget, we are not here to surrender. We are here to endure. In the forests surrounding Verdun, Jorin led groups of fighters in guerrilla raids against Zoran supply lines. Every strike was precise, every ambush a testament to human ingenuity. The humans had no central command, no advanced technology beyond their simple firearms and scavenged tools. Yet they fought with coordination born from trust, from understanding, from the knowledge that each life mattered not only to the individual, but to the collective. Even the smallest acts carried profound weight. A mother led a child through ruins to safety. A young man carried the wounded across a battlefield under fire. A teacher whispered lessons of hope to terrified students huddled in a ruined school. These acts of courage, often unnoticed, built a foundation of resilience that no Zoran weapon could destroy. Mara, moving from shelter to shelter, treated the wounded with what little supplies she had. Her hands were steady, her voice calm, and her presence a balm in a world that had become fire and shadow. "Pain is temporary," she whispered to those who winced with every movement. "Our spirit is eternal. We endure because we must." We fight because we are human. Night fell, and yet the humans refused to falter. Fires from destroyed buildings lit the streets like beacons, guiding the survivors and marking the battleground. The Jorin advanced, their drones scanning for threats, their soldiers moving with calculated precision. But each attempt to subdue the humans was met with unpredictable resistance. Traps hidden in ruins, ambushes from rooftops, improvised weapons. The humans adapted with creativity and speed that no simulation could predict. Kael'thar, for the first time, felt a flicker of doubt. His lieutenants, who had long carried an unquestioning confidence in their technology and strategy, now muttered quietly among themselves. These creatures, they should have fallen. Why do they endure? He did not answer. He could see it for himself. Humans did not merely survive, they inspired one another to endure. Fear was transformed into courage, despair into strategy, and pain into a source of determination. The human spirit was not mechanical. It was raw, unpredictable, and unbreakable. Across the planet, small victories fed a growing legend. Stories of bravery traveled faster than Jorin communications could intercept. Children whispered about fighters who had driven back alien soldiers with nothing but courage. Adults shared tales of neighbors who had saved strangers in the middle of chaos. Every story, every memory, became a weapon as powerful as any rifle. And somewhere in the shadows, Liora, Jorin, and Mara paused to watch the horizon. The city was scarred, the forests blackened, yet the people moved, alive with a strength that no fire could consume. Kael'thar's ultimate weapon, meant to erase entire regions in a single strike, had failed to crush the will of those who remained. He realized slowly and uncomfortably that the humans' greatest weapon was themselves, their ability to endure, to hope, and to inspire one another in the darkest moments. The first light of dawn broke across the scarred horizon. Humans stood among the ruins, tending to the wounded, sharing food, carrying the dead, and preparing for another day of struggle. Each act, each heartbeat, each breath was a declaration. They would not surrender. They would not be broken. And for the first time, Kael'thar understood the terrifying truth. To conquer humanity was not merely to defeat them. It was to extinguish something eternal, something impossible to destroy. The humans' resolve was not an obstacle, it was a storm. And they were the lightning that could strike anywhere, any time without warning. The war continued. But the humans had already proven something undeniable. No force, no matter how powerful, could break their spirit. And in that realization, Kael'thar, conqueror of worlds, began to understand the true meaning of being unbroken. The war had dragged into months, and the Jorin, despite their superior technology and relentless strategy, were beginning to feel the edges of failure. Kael'thar's calculations, once infallible, faltered at every turn. The humans' resilience was not simply stubbornness, it was an unmeasurable force, a combination of fear, hope, ingenuity, and an indomitable will that refused to bow to destiny. From orbit, Kael'thar watched the human forces. They were scattered, irregular, lacking centralized command, and yet every attack he launched, every weapon deployed, every strategy devised to crush them, seemed to be met with a response that no algorithm could predict. Every fallen city produced a new group of fighters. Every destroyed village became a cradle of resistance. Humans did not merely endure. They adapted, they evolved, they multiplied the force of their defiance. In the ruins of Verdun, Liora stood atop a shattered building, her eyes scanning the horizon. Around her, survivors gathered quietly, carrying water, food, and supplies. Children clung to her, elders followed with careful steps, and fighters waited, ready to act on her signal. Despite exhaustion and hunger, there was a fire in every gaze, a flame that refused to be extinguished by alien firepower or fear. Jorin led a team of guerrilla fighters through a network of tunnels and forests, their movements swift and silent. They had mapped the Jorin patrol routes, improvised weapons, and traps. Each ambush, each clever maneuver, cut into the enemy's confidence. It was no longer simply survival. It was strategy born of courage, innovation, and the understanding that even the smallest human action could have monumental consequences. Mara moved through the shadows, tending to the wounded and encouraging those too weak to stand. Her voice, steady and warm, carried reassurance and defiance alike. "We endure," she told a frightened child. "Even when it seems impossible, even when the night is darkest, we endure. That is what makes us strong." Her hands moved quickly, treating wounds and bandaging burns, but her words were the real weapon, stronger than any rifle or firebomb. The Jorin, sensing the persistence of humanity, unleashed their ultimate assault, a series of orbital bombardments designed to eradicate entire regions in moments. Cities crumbled beneath beams of pure energy, forests ignited like oceans of fire. Humanity's numbers were staggering, yet the humans refused to falter. Each survivor took shelter, regrouped, and continued the fight, their courage multiplying as each assault failed to extinguish their spirit. Kael'thar felt a strange unease as he observed the aftermath. Where his weapon had burned, humans had risen from rubble. Where fear should have reigned, hope had taken root. It was no longer a war of attrition, it was a war of spirit. And in this battle, the humans were unmatched. Then, in a moment that would define the war, Liora's group launched an attack that shattered the perception of Jorin invincibility. Using hidden tunnels, improvised explosives, and sheer coordination, they struck at a key supply hub. Fires erupted, alarms screamed, and the Jorin soldiers scrambled to respond. The humans did not run. They moved with precision, courage, and a willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. In the span of hours, a critical stronghold was neutralized, not by technology but by ingenuity, courage, and sheer determination. Kael'thar, observing the operation, felt an unfamiliar sensation, awe mingled with fear. He had never seen a species capable of such coordinated defiance without formal command, without sophisticated technology, without predictable patterns. Humans fought with something deeper than survival. They fought with purpose, with passion, with heart. For the first time, Kael'thar considered retreat. Not for strategy, not for calculation, but because he understood the truth. Conquering these beings was not possible. Not with weapons, not with numbers, not with fear. Their strength lay in something eternal, something untouchable, something that burned brighter than any Jorin fleet could dim: the human spirit. He lowered his gaze from the observation deck and spoke softly, almost to himself. "Perhaps we came to conquer the wrong world." On Earth, dawn broke over the scarred horizon. Fires still burned, smoke rose, and ruins stretched across the land, but humanity stood tall. Liora, Jorin, and Mara surveyed the battlefield. Exhausted, battered, yet unbroken, their eyes met with a shared understanding. They had faced annihilation and survived. The tide was turning, and they were no longer simply fighting to endure. They were fighting to reclaim their world. And high above, Kael'thar watched in silent recognition. Humans were savage, yes, but not in cruelty. They were savage in their courage, their love, and their refusal to bow. To conquer them was to face the impossible. To face the human heart was to witness something eternal, something unbroken, something that would endure long after fire and shadow had passed. The turning point had come. Humanity was no longer merely surviving. Humanity was rising. The Jorin retreated. Ships of gleaming silver vanished into the black void, leaving Earth scarred, battered, and smoking, but unbroken. The humans who had survived emerged from hiding, blinking at the sky, hearts pounding with relief and disbelief. They had faced annihilation and stood firm. They had looked into the eyes of a conqueror and refused to bow. Liora walked through the ruins of her city, her boots crunching over shattered glass and rubble. Children clung to her skirts, frightened but alive. Elders followed, leaning on their staffs, carrying what little they could salvage. Every step was a statement: humanity had endured. Each survivor's gaze, fierce and unyielding, was a living testament to resilience. Jorin worked alongside other fighters, clearing rubble and tending to the wounded. Every small act mattered now: rebuilding shelters, distributing food, helping those too injured to move. They had survived the unimaginable, but survival alone was not enough. Humanity would rise from the ashes, stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before. Mara moved among the survivors, tending wounds, calming fears, and speaking words that had become their greatest weapon. "We endured because we must. We endured because we are human." And now we rebuild, not because we have no enemies, but because we have each other. Her hands were steady, her voice soft yet firm, a gentle reminder that compassion was as powerful as courage. Kael'thar, far above Earth, watched the humans with a mix of awe and something he had never known before: respect. He had come to conquer a species expecting fear and submission. Instead, he had found fire, resilience, and unbreakable will. Every calculation, every strategy, every weapon he had deployed had failed to crush them. Humans were fragile, yes, and flawed, yet their spirit was untouchable. He recalled Mara's words, still echoing in his mind. "You will not break us. You can kill our bodies, but never our spirit." The realization struck him. Conquering humans was impossible. It was not a question of firepower or numbers, but of essence. Humanity's power lay in their courage, their ingenuity, their love, and their refusal to surrender even in the face of annihilation. To face them was to confront the eternal, to stand before a force that could not be contained. On Earth, humans began the slow work of rebuilding. Ruined homes became shelters, devastated fields were replanted, and broken communities became stronger, bound by shared survival. Liora helped coordinate relief efforts, guiding people with a calm authority that inspired confidence. Jorin organized work parties, turning destruction into opportunity. Mara healed both bodies and hearts, reminding everyone that the strength to endure was also the strength to forgive, to care, and to rebuild. And yet, amid the recovery, a quiet celebration burned in every heart. Humanity had survived not because they were strong in the conventional sense, not because they had weapons as powerful as the Zorans, but because they had refused to surrender. Each act of courage, each spark of hope, each moment of defiance had become a weapon more powerful than any technology. Kael'thar, observing from the void, realized that the humans' true victory was not only survival, it was the proof that life itself, when protected by spirit and courage, could never be extinguished. He understood that to conquer humanity was to confront the impossible. To face the human heart was to witness something untouchable, unbroken, and eternal. Somewhere in the forests, in the mountains, in the remnants of the cities, humans shared stories of courage, of neighbors who had saved strangers, of children who had inspired adults with their bravery, of fighters who had faced overwhelming odds without flinching. These stories were no longer mere memories. They were the foundation of a legacy, a testament that humanity, though battered, would never bow. Liora knelt beside a child, gently brushing soot from his hair. "Look," she said softly, pointing to the horizon where the sun rose over ruined buildings. "The world is scarred, yes, but it is ours, and we will make it beautiful again." Jorin helped an elderly man carry water to the survivors. "We fought, we endured, and we won. Not because the war is over, but because we never surrendered," he said. Mara tended to a group of children bandaging a scraped arm. "Remember," she whispered, "no one can take this from you, the courage, the hope, the fire inside. That is humanity. That is our legacy." Far above, Kael'thar turned his ship away, carrying the memory of a species he could not conquer. Humans were savage, yes, but in a way unlike anything he had ever encountered. Savage not in cruelty, but in life, in courage, in unbreakable will. Earth remained, scarred but unbowed, and somewhere in the universe the truth was written. To conquer humanity is to confront the impossible. To face the human heart is to witness the unbroken. The world would heal, humanity would endure, and their spirit would shine untamed and eternal.